Okay, it looks like we have a good amount of folks in the room at the moment, so I think we'll get started. Taryn, would you like to begin?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Ross. Hello, everyone. I keep seeing everybody's faces. That's absolutely great. Tyrion Almanzar, I'm the Assistant Dean for Financial Aid and Admissions. And on behalf of our office and the J School, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to join us today in the next hour or so as we talk about with our panelists, our esteemed panelists, I should say, why journalism, how the school fits into the ever-evolving, ever-changing world of reporting. And they talk about their experience and how to be a great journalist. But before we get started, I'd just like to take 1 second to acknowledge my colleagues in the admissions office, because I know most of you will be dealing with all of us, either via email, phone calls, and it's just always great to have a face to the name. So, like I said, I'm Tyrion Almanzar, Assistant Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid. I have with us Christine Souders, who is our Associate Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid. Ross Yelsey, who you have all heard from, who is our Assistant Director of Admissions and Marketing. And of course, we have with us David Hooker, which I'm sure all of you have talked to and emailed with, who is our office coordinator. Just to give you a very brief overview of the agenda of what we'll be discussing and not discussing during the next hour so that you know how things will flow. I know because I was reading the questions that most of you submitted when you registered. And thank you for sending your questions because that helped us in formulating the next hour or so. We will not be talking about the admissions process, the application materials, or any of that. We have 2 webinars, and Ross is putting in the information on the chat, coming up on October 2nd, which is a Saturday. Another one on October 15th, which is on a Friday, and that's also at 12, where we'll go over those questions. But every Friday at 3, and you can still register for this information session, we host for an hour or so, where we answer all of your questions about applications, financial aid, scholarship aid, which we do offer, because that was one of the main questions that I saw there. We do offer that, so that's an opportunity to ask that. And of course, you can set up individual appointments with us. There's nothing more like having the unasked questions, so ask us. So with that said, one other thing I remembered, Ross. We have disabled the chat for now so that you're able to concentrate on the conversation. However, we will let you know when it's the time for Q&A. You'll type your question. It will not be live, meaning the rest of the audience will not be able to see that. And that's so that you feel comfortable in asking whatever question you may have without the fear of everybody else seeing what you're writing. Ross will be moderating and will be asking those questions. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Sally Hership, who will be moderating the panel and who is the director of the radio journalism here at the J School. Sally?
Hi, thanks, Taryn. Hi, everybody. I should just say right away that I am an audio person. I'm a public radio reporter and a podcaster. And so having my face on a screen fills me with terror. So I'm gonna need like great questions from you guys, big smiles to help me out. I see Ali, Banu, Trisha, Jean, just saying hi to some people. Liz, Yuki, I am counting on you guys. Let's see, who else is here? Julia, Benjamin, to help me out, okay? So I think just to get right to the point, and we'll introduce the other great panelists as we go along. I think the first question I'd like to start with is, what inspired you to become a journalist? And I think I'd like to turn that first question over to the Dean of the Journalism School, Steve Coll. And rumor has it that there was a music magazine in your background. Is that true?
Yeah, well, thank you, Sally. Welcome, everybody. Yes, I'm Steve, and I'm the Dean of the school, and I've been here, this is my 9th year, And I love it here. It's a wonderful place. Please come. My experience with journalism started in the third grade, actually, when my teachers went on strike at the public school I went to, and I mimeographed a newspaper documenting their picket line, and the principal of the school censored it, which and refused to distribute it. And I thought, well, this seems kind of dangerous and interesting. And so I've been with it ever since. I think, you know, a lot of us on this call, I'm sure you who are interested in the school, seek in journalism a lively, engaging profession that has meaning and inspiration, and that's what journalism does offer, I think, and what brings many of us together. I want to acknowledge there are many journalisms in the United States and around the world, and we don't all have to fit into the Hollywood idealized public interest investigative reporter to take an enormous amount of satisfaction and to make a big contribution. But what all those journalisms, I think, often have in common is a sense of a life living in the public square with this extraordinary permission to travel and to be present at big events, to ask questions, impertinent questions of powerful people, and to just live a public life with a purpose. And when we think about candidates for our school, we're often really searching for motivation. And because we know that journalism is a very open profession that you can succeed at from so many different starting places. It's really reporting driven, and reporting is something that so many people can do effectively from such different backgrounds, but you have to be motivated to do it. And so you'll help us with that as this process goes along, and we look forward to hearing more of your specific questions.
And next I want to go to John Haskins, Dean of Student Life. Steve mentioned travel, and you've had this really cool career, right, where you've gotten to be in different places around the world. Can you tell us what inspired you to get your start, and maybe some of the places you end up, and if you ever anticipated that?
So I guess I'm a late bloomer. I didn't get excited about journalism until I was in high school. Had my grade school gone on strike, I'm sure I would have jumped into that. But I was editor of my high school newspaper. And honestly, what has driven me over the years is just a sense of curiosity. I want to know what's going on. I want to know what people are doing. I want to know what people are thinking. And it's always been important for me to be in people's business. But more, in addition to that, yes, it's about a mission. It's about the willingness and eagerness to serve. It's also a lot of fun. And I don't want to sell that short by any means. I've had so much fun over the years. I've been in newspapers for almost 35 years before coming here, but last year. And I've had some wonderful opportunities on the editing side, managing people, deciding stories, pushing people around, telling them what to do. And I've had a great opportunity to work overseas in London, Paris, and Hong Kong over the years, but also work in New York City. And I've just had a great deal of fun, and it's all driven by the sense of curiosity and the sense of fun. And I can't deny it, I'm still in it.
And next, Winnie O'Kelley, our Dean of Academic Affairs. Tell us what got you started.
Hi, everyone. It sounds somewhat similar. I'm a really late bloomer because I wound up getting into journalism in college. I studied journalism at Northwestern University. And honestly, I grew up, I can't even say in a small town. I mean, I grew up in the middle of nowhere. I was in a rural area, and I didn't have much engagement with the outside world. But one thing that did happen in my household is a lot of publications came into the house every day. Now, some of them were Progressive Farmer, okay? They weren't exactly scintillating reading, but there was also the Wall Street Journal and the Atlanta Journal and Constitution. And I saw on TV women being reporters. And honestly, I didn't have role models. So for me, this was a way to engage with the world. And that was what I wanted more than anything, is to be a participant and to see what was going on and to understand the decisions that were being made. And ultimately to hold the powerful accountable, quite frankly. So that has been my driving force.
That is so great. And I just want to say too, I feel like a super late bloomer now because I didn't officially start as a journalist till I was 31, and I started at a show called Radio Lab. But for anyone out there who's maybe older or comes from a different background, I went to art school. And I was also bringing journals to school, kind of like this notebook here, and asking people to document important events, like when I was in high school and the Gulf War broke out. So I didn't know it, but I was like secretly a journalist. And it was so cool when I figured out that it was a career and I could do it and get paid to do it. For me, it was a pretty straightforward, logical decision. It was like an art career, journalism. But I'm curious to hear for other folks, there's so many new platforms, the industry is changing so much. Why pursue a career in journalism today? Winnie, let's start back with you.
Oh, well, I can't imagine a more important moment to be doing it. And frankly, as Steve said, it's not all about being public interest journalism. There's a lot of different kinds, but we're in a period where it feels like a lot of rapid change. The pandemic has been one that came out of nowhere seemingly and changed our whole lives, turned them upside down. And being able to document that and understand it and provide people with insight and community, which is some of the things that journalism do, seems incredibly important. And if you're looking on the public interest side, in this era of disinformation, don't you want to help people get to the truth? I do. And I think there's a way that as journalists, you can help them do that, even whether you're bearing witness to a catastrophe or whether you're bearing witness to what a teen is experiencing during a time of lockdown and quarantine. Those things are really important. And I think we get a chance to validate the human experience that feels really, really significant. But this is a particularly good time to do it. When you have this kind of rapid change in the world, you think it's an opportunity to really hold the powerful accountable and to ask some of those profound questions. And there's never been a better time for, muckrakers to step forward. So I find it really exciting.
And John, how about you? Why not go to Stanford, go to Silicon Valley, drop out, become a billionaire unicorn? Why journalism today? Why work when we have all these new apps when you could be like making your own app?
Now, I led with it's a lot of fun. It's just like nonstop joy. But the truth is there is a mission behind it. You go into journalism because you want to serve. You want to serve other people. You gather these skills, the ability to tell a story, the ability to talk, to talk to people, to get their stories, to share them, to share the human experience. You do it because it's necessary. You do it because you are bringing these skills together to help people understand the world and understand each other. It's absolutely necessary. I'm not saying that apps aren't necessary. I'm not saying that phones aren't necessary. I'm saying that undeniably, no matter what technology we have, no matter what era we're living in, it's always necessary to connect people, and people need help. And it's a career of service. It's a career that's necessary. And I'll go back to it. It's a lot of fun too.
So Steve, I want to turn to you. Journalism is one of those unique careers. You don't need a license, right? It's not like you're a doctor or a lawyer. How can you speak a little bit about how the school prepares students to become journalists and the importance of, I guess, studying the craft?
No, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, it's not a licensed profession, at least not in the United States, but it is a profession. And so what we try to do is to prepare our students for what will be required of them, no matter which path in the profession they go down, to find their way through ethical landscapes, to recognize what standards of excellence are expected and enforced in newsrooms large and small, to learn in the mentored environment of our graduate school, the methodologies that lead to excellent journalism. I was just in an ethics class all morning with 55 students, and one of the sort of learnings that came up from a guest speaker was, you have to trust the process in journalism. Process leads you to good outcomes. And what we mean by that is reporting, most of all, and the methodologies that are teachable. They're teachable in the kind of course that we offer 11 months It's just, I think, the right length of time to learn how to be a sophisticated reporter who can use diverse tools, not just interviewing techniques, techniques of discovery. Where are the sources? Where are people when you want to find them? Public records, data sets, and new technologies that are increasingly part of journalism practice. For example, taught a course this summer in which we learned how to use open source satellite photography to investigate human rights violations all over the globe, to connect that with on the ground reporting and so forth. So it's a very specific suite of teachable methodologies that, especially whether you've done some of it, or whether you've done none of it, you can accelerate in these 11 months in a very powerful way. So I think, to circle back to your point, Sally, I've always marveled and really loved the truth about journalism, which is that it is open to anyone who is willing to put their energy into it. You don't need a mathematician's brain. You don't need a surgeon's hands. You can come from anywhere, any base of talent and experience, and you can acquire these methodologies. And the other thing that's different about the kind of public service that we aspire to do in journalism is that, unlike being, a social worker or a prosecutor or a public defender, whatever version of service you might have encountered before, a teacher, in journalism, you have this independence that's really quite glorious. You don't have to be imprisoned by institutions. You can do this work on your own speed and with your own values driving your choices. So that's what you'll encounter here, those kinds of conversations, that kind of teaching.
Yeah, I remember you were just talking about the freedom. I remember changing in my early 30s from an office where, everything I did we had to have meetings to vet every single email and memo I sent, and the freedom to just go out and report, or to write a letter to Stephen Mnuchin, the Secretary of the Treasury, asking for information. Like, guys, you get to do that when you're a reporter. You have a license to be curious and to hold people to account. It's really cool. Winnie, what about you? Can you talk a little bit about the need the help that school provides, even though this isn't, you don't need the same kind of training that, say, a doctor or a lawyer does?
Right. Amplifying on what Steve said, I think the most important element here is whatever kind of journalism you ultimately do, and it might change a lot over the years. Many of us find ourselves on TV and in audio and never expected to be there. That was not our strength, and we muddle through perhaps. But Columbia really teaches you how to do that reporting that Steve talked about that's so essential, and how to tell a story, and not just repeat the story you're told, but to dig deeper and get the story behind the story, and to see the story from 360 degrees, not just the official story, but the story of others. And that's something we really try to emphasize, is really getting that full picture that a quality journalist does. And that takes a certain amount of skill, and it takes a certain amount of practice. And yes, you can go out, certainly there are citizen journalists everywhere in the world today, repeating information and spilling it out. But if you aspire to that higher level, I think there really are some things you can get from a journalism school in a very concentrated period of time that can catapult you into that realm. I like to think about it on some level, like if you have a dozen journalism instructors over the course of the academic year, that's as if you had worked for each of them for a year in the workplace. You've learned that much from a dozen of the very best of the best. And that's the other thing Columbia has to offer, quite frankly. We are the heart of the media universe here in New York. And it is the lab where so much of the change is occurring, where people are thinking about streaming, where it's changing and moving in new directions, and where journalism is really concentrated. And we're able to bring you, not just from our faculty, but also from adjuncts and others who are still practicing it, bring that to you and let you participate and feel what it's like to actually be in the hotbed of journalism today, good and bad.
I know, I just, to Winnie's point, a lot of us are working reporters. I just came out of an edit at NPR. I put on a clean shirt. And then I'm going to scramble back and finish my script right after this. I think, John, I would love to put the next question to you. I think this is a really big one. As everyone's been talking about, reporters come from, one of the great things is journalists can spring up from all of these varied backgrounds. What does Columbia look for in its applicants, and what kind of students do you think will really do well at school? Because this can be about a lot more than just succeeding in journalism school. It can be about a lot more than just building on a great GPA. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, and we look for a number of things, but underlying it is sort of the point I made before, is a sense of curiosity. We want students who are eager. We want students who want to grow. We want students who are curious about the industry. We want students who are curious about the world. We also very much want students who are able to express themselves. That doesn't mean that you can write perfect journalism coming in, but on your essays that we ask for going in, your transcripts, we want people who can think, who are eager to think. Other than that, I don't like to put a lot of restrictions because I hope everyone on this call will actually apply. You know, when we want to cast the net wide to get a diverse audience, we want people from, diverse applicants, I should say, we want people from all sorts of backgrounds. So I hate to say we will look for this. Students, you know, often ask me, what is the one thing I can say or the one thing I can do? Well, there isn't one thing. When we look at a pile of applications, we also want to be surprised and delighted by what you bring. So each one of you has something that every one of the other of you does not have. So we do want that sense of curiosity. We want that ability to express yourself in whatever way that you want to find clarity. Other than that, it's up to you.
I want to turn this question to Steve and then to Winnie. And just a reminder, the question is, you know, maybe something helpful, either what does Columbia look for in its applicants, or is there any one particular quality you think that students will really help students succeed in journalism school? And before I turn it to Steve and Winnie, you guys, I hope you are all preparing your questions. Remember, I'm counting on you. Trisha, I see you. Allie, Sarah, Ariel, Anna. Okay, so you guys are getting your questions ready. Okay, Steve.
Well, at the risk of repeating myself, I do think that when we read applications, we're trying to understand your motivation. What brings you to journalism, and why? How do you visualize yourself as a journalist? That may express itself specifically through, you know, areas that you imagine yourself covering, or experiences you've had that drew you toward journalism, or inspirations that have brought you toward journalism from another field. But we want to understand that. And I think when we evaluate the other elements of your application, your performance in school before, your writing, the way your references see you and recommend you, at least for me, I'm often trying to distill from that, okay, does this person really understand what journalism is, what the practice requires, and what it offers, and what brings them toward us? Because it is a joyous profession in a lot of ways, but it asks something of you. You've got to talk to strangers. You've got to walk out into the public square when it's noisy and people are yelling at each other. And so it's good to know why you're there and why you want to be there. And so we want to understand that about you as part of the application process. And
Winnie, do you have anything to add? I don't want to put you on the spot.
Well, I'll just say a couple of small things, which are very specific, which is sometimes someone will say, well, I'm an introvert. Can I be a journalist? And I hear that sometimes. And actually, quite a lot of journalists are introverts. And I think what they find is it gives them an excuse to go out and engage with people. It also makes them excellent listeners, which are both really important skills for journalists. So it's not about a personality type exactly. I will say it is about a willingness to be uncomfortable. You know, if you're willing to do that, if you're willing to put yourself in a situation with someone who has been a victim of a crime, or who is wanting to tell you something as a whistleblower, these are uncomfortable situations. If you're willing to do that, you may find you excel in this profession, and we find that. And I'm going to just mention, without using a name, a recent graduate who found herself arrested during the George Floyd protests. And when she talked about that, she talked about how Columbia Journalism School prepared her for that situation. Our ethics training and our law training, it was not something she ever expected in a million years. She was there as a journalist. She was doing everything right. She was put on the spot. She was hauled away. She was arrested. She knew how to stand up for herself. She knew what her rights were, and she understood it was important. So that willingness to go into an uncomfortable place, along with your curiosity and your sense of mission, will serve you well.
Agreed. I was just thinking, I'm a secret introvert. I'm such an introvert. But when I have my microphone, I'm doing my job. You don't want to be near me at a party. I'm like really shy and frozen. But when I have my mic, I have a license to be curious, right? And I agree with what everyone has said. We're doing such important work. All right. Have you guys, I saw a lot of note taking, a lot of exciting thinking was happening. We are ready for some questions. If you want to address it, specifically a question to Winnie or Steve or John, just let us know. Okay, I see questions starting to come in. So I will pose this to our panelists. Question, if you are interested in pursuing social justice, how do you do that through journalism? So this is, I think, a question we hear a lot from students, right? The distinction between journalism and activism. Is there, Winnie or Steve or John, does anyone feel strongly about fielding that? How do you achieve, please go ahead.
I'll make a few stabs at it. It is something that comes up a lot these days. And I think it goes back to one of the points Steve made early on. There is not a single journalism. There are journalisms, and there are different forms and different formats. There are some publications, media outlets that steer much more toward advocacy, and that is a choice you can make. The skills you get in journalism can help you make convincing cases. There is a bit of a line between that and what we think of as traditional journalism, where it's more reportage based. And you sort of get to decide in your career which directions you're going to go in. You will practice the profession differently. You will maybe take on different kinds of things. And you will maybe not steer into the kind of publication that emphasizes a different kind of journalism than what you want to do. So no, not all journalists are social advocates. Not all are advocating for social justice. Some may feel that strongly and may want to chronicle the plight. Others may want to steer toward more advocacy journalism, and often people go into criticism or go into other places. That's also an acceptable outcome. So those are the kinds of choices, just like you can choose between documentary and video and audio and print and news and magazines. There are a wide range of choices in the profession.
Oh, and I'm actually glad that you mentioned those different areas of interest or those formats. We have a couple of questions here. How flexible is the MS program for pursuing different paths? So for instance, if you're interested in traditional print writing, video, audio, broadcast, sports, politics. Yeah.
I almost feel like, Sally, you should answer that.
Sure. So with a couple of exceptions, the program does provide you with a lot of choice. So if you are interested in exploring video and audio, there are different options to take skills classes in the fall. There are, audio is my area. There are audio classes and video classes you can also take that are longer and more extensive in the spring. And at the base of it all, when Columbia begins, you take what's called a reporting class, where you work pretty closely with one professor and learn the basic, the fundamentals of journalism. So I would say the program is fairly flexible. And then depending, there's sort of an overlap. Your sports, that's sort of a beat area rather than a medium. So you could choose to cover different beats: education, healthcare, science. There are all kinds of amazing classes, religion, through these different mediums. So there is a lot of flexibility. Am I missing anything?
Well, I'll just throw this out just so that people think about it. Sometimes on the way in, you think you know what you want to specialize in or pursue. And that's great. And if you do, we'll try to help you on that path. There's a special application process for the investigative program or for the documentary program, for example. But for the most part, You can decide that early on, or you can come in as a generalist thinking, I want to do this, but you might change your mind. You might decide, I have no interest in audio, whatever, and then after a workshop, you decide you're really interested. In the spring, you can turn your attentions in that direction. So there is surprising amount of flexibility to pursue these areas. And we didn't really talk about the master's project, but that is one of the cornerstones of the program, which gives you an opportunity to do something really in-depth. And that can go in a lot of different directions depending on your interests. So it's another way and another piece of the program where you can push off in a slightly different direction. You could be, I think we did have someone who was a documentary student, but who also worked on an investigative piece that has done really well. So there's a lot of different opportunities for you to blend things together as your interests dictate.
Okay, the next question, John, I think this is an area you have been working in. I'm just scrolling, bear with me as I don't lose that question. Can you talk a little bit about how the school has been recently focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion? Such an important topic.
Sure, absolutely. And it isn't just recent, but one of the things that I hope that I bring to this is a history of working with a number of diverse groups and students from around the country and around the world for a program I ran at the New York Times. As we go forward and we try, I assume this is diversity among the student body, although we are obviously interested in diversity among our staff and faculty too. Our goal here is to build a diverse student body so that we can, so we can cover a diverse world. We have to get these students ready for the industry that is rapidly changing. It's a topic I can talk about all day, not just the application process, but as we, one of my chief goals here is to, I overuse this phrase, is to cast the net very widely, not just in terms of geography, but in terms of experience, in terms of background, in terms of class, in terms of wealth. As far as, one of our chief tools to diversify is to increase scholarship. And we work tirelessly to do that. Just this last year, we got a large scholarship from NBC, and we are consistently working to do that to help more diverse students come to Columbia University. We acknowledge it is expensive. We acknowledge that it is a commitment. We acknowledge that it is an investment, and we need to work with those students. So that is always one of our, and it's not new, but it continues and it has intensified to increase scholarship to get a wider set of students here. We also plan to basically recruit in more places. A lot of it we still have to do virtually, but that hasn't slowed us by any means. We work with a lot of national affinity groups. We go to a lot of different types of schools, a lot of job fairs that we attend, all in order to cast that net wide. So increased scholarship, looking at additional pools for students, those are our two main efforts.
John, I think this one, or rather, sorry, Steve, and then I'll come back to you, John. Steve, this one I think is a good fit for you. Can you talk a little bit, the journalism schools here in the States, it's in New York. How do we deal with issues of international reporting, both in terms of bias and coverage and keeping students informed about global topics and prepared to report internationally?
Well, it's a great question, covers a lot of ground. We think of ourselves, we aspire to be a global school in every respect. We have been trying to increase the way international journalism flows through all of our curricula. We recognize that as much as a third of our student body comes from outside the United States, often from quite an astonishing range of countries, as many as 40 or 50 different sending countries each year. And many of our American-originated students want to work outside of the United States. So that's our priority, first of all. Second, we're in New York, which is a global city, and all of the world is here. And while we have to take advantage of the proximity of New York to really provide the kind of meaningful field reporting experiences that I think young journalists, new journalists really need to develop their confidence in their methodologies. This is not a profession that can only be done from a desktop. although there's a lot of great work that can be done from a desktop, you do need to get out and discover on the ground. And so the glory of doing it in New York is that there's so many first generation communities here, not to mention institutions like the United Nations that bring governments here. So you have folks who have come from all around the world and from all walks of life. So if you want to do what you might think of as bottom-up reporting about almost any country in the world, you'll find communities here within an hour or two at the most to report in. And then you also have the institutional world here through the UN and through DC, not very far away. So I think a lot of us who teach want to take advantage of New York's global character in these ways.
Okay, I'm going to open this to the three of you. How do faculty mentor or advise their students? Are you available to help students succeed? Who wants to go first?
Okay, I'll jump in. I love it when a student knocks on my door or writes me with a message and says, I'm trying to figure out, I had this yesterday. A student said, I can't figure out which writing class to take. I need help. I'm like, well, sure, come on by, let's talk. Frequently I get, because my expertise is more business and economics, I'll get someone who's in the MS program who I'm not instructing saying, look, I really want to know how to succeed in this. What do I need to do? And we spend time talking with them, and we look at their stories, we help them, we talk with them about how to get the first steps and get their foot in the door. I think you will find this is an extraordinarily engaged faculty. And I think I've only been here a year, I have to be honest, but I find it, or at least in this seat, I've been teaching a little bit longer than that, one of the most engaged faculties you will find, in part because they're still very much engaged in journalism. They're not sitting up at Columbia teaching students all day. They're out in the world, and they're very much thinking about what skills you need out there. They're talking to other editors and reporters and others who are looking for young people, and they're very engaged in that. And the hands-on attention, I don't think you'd find it anywhere else.
Steve or John? Yeah.
Yes, if I could jump in here, that's, within the classroom, we also, there are three sort of aspects of my job here and three departments that I oversee here from the beginning until after you're gone. So the first one is our admissions department, which engages with applicants from the very beginning. All the people you see here, Christine, Taryn, David, and Ross, spend their days speaking to prospective students, both when the application process and the financial aid process, once they're here. That's what we do. We also have an office of student life to make sure that you're okay all the time that you're here. And right now that's a lot of COVID, but before and after COVID, there's a lot of other consultation that goes on that is really nonstop. And my door is not only open, but usually swinging back and forth because someone's coming in. I had 3 students this morning. I have 3 more coming in just right after this call. This is what we do. But also after that, or rather while you're still here and after that, is our career services department. We have, I will say that our career services department probably has the deepest Rolodex of journalism jobs in the country. Of any institution. And I said that before I went here, and now I know that it's true. We have the largest career expo in terms of recruiters in the country. We do it. That's all we do. That's what we do, is we help you get here, we help you survive here and blossom here, and we help you land once you get out of here.
And that's great because it actually does connect with another really great question, which John has already sort of answered, which is how do you help students succeed in the job market? What is career development like? And I just want to add that as an instructor at the school, that's, like John mentioned, that's a big part of my job and I take it really seriously. I get text messages and emails. I've been doing audio for about 17 years, a few times a week. And the question is usually, who do you got? I'm making a podcast. I need a producer. I need someone to cut tape. I need a good guest booker. They have to live in Alaska. They need to speak French. Who do you got? And one of the great things is that over the course of the year, by working with you guys one-on-one, not only am I your teacher, I get a really thorough sense of how you work, and I'm able to really speak to those skills. And I'm often joking with my friends that if I ever stop reporting and leave the school, I'm going to open my own employment agency because I get so many requests. So like 10 years ago, if people asked how they could break into public radio, I would say, how do you feel about moving to Alaska? And now the great news is there are so many jobs that I cannot refer people fast enough, which is really cool. And in fact, now at The Indicator, the NPR podcast where I'm working, one of my old students just started there. So that's really cool, Adrienne Ma.
If I could just jump in for a quick second here, since everyone cares about jobs, we do care about classwork, and we spoke earlier about the deep experience of all the faculty and staff here. But even now, as we speak, I am on this call, but I'm missing our call between the Wall Street Journal, one of the chief recruiters there, and our current student body. Later today, Politico will be on a Zoom call with our student body, and that just doesn't let up. We're able to draw the top employers from around the country and around the world to talk to students. This is all before the huge career expo that comes up. In addition to that, we have seminars on writing cover letters and polishing your resumes. We have one-on-one meetings with our career services department. It is a robust careers program. Your success is our success. So we care deeply about that, and we really invest in that. We invest in you.
John, should you just mention a little bit about some of the internships that are available that we fund? Because I do think that is like an addition and a really important one for the student body.
Yeah, it's not just internships, but also fellowships too. Even this last year, we had a program with INN, which is an organization that helps smaller nonprofit institutions finance and administer their internships. So we had opportunities in Mississippi and Honolulu and Asheville, North Carolina and Texas and all over the country, in addition to ones in New York and Washington and some remote ones too, that are specific, really set aside just for Columbia University. There are scores of them like that. And in addition to what Sally said earlier, people call us up and say, who do you have? There are lots of opportunities for students that are not just Columbia specific, scores and scores of them. If you put yourself forward, if you are flexible, if you are eager, you'll find something here. You'll find plenty of opportunities if you're good at it. So Columbia specific opportunities around the globe, they're all here.
Steve, I want to put this question to you, which is, what traits might a trained professional journalist have that a citizen journalist might not?
Oh, you're muted again.
You're muted.
So the main thing, answer involves the techniques that professional journalists use to investigate stories effectively and to go deep and also sometimes quickly to provide factual reporting about matters of public importance. So you will know how to find people who don't want to be found. You'll know how to identify public records associated with an individual you may be examining. You'll learn how to use court records, not only to access them, but to mine them for insights about controversies, institutions, individuals. You find stories through using public records. You'll learn how to file and follow up on and successfully execute a Freedom of Information Act request in the United States, and you'll explore how to take advantage of similar laws in other countries. You'll learn how to apply the techniques of data science to journalism practice, to acquire, sort, find meaning in large data sets, patterns of institutional conduct. If you're computationally minded, you'll learn how to find your way to the frontier of the application of computational and computer science techniques to the public purposes of journalism. For example, in today's world, every time we shop, but also when our governments allocate public resources, they're often using algorithms to decide who gets what. Our function as journalists is usually to say, how are you making those choices? Are you doing that fairly? Do you have unconscious bias in the way you're allocating public dollars? Well, in today's world, if we're to ask that of government, sometimes we have to be able to reverse engineer an algorithm to really get an accurate answer. And so these are techniques. I think some citizen journalists can self-teach some of these, but to integrate this into a fully formed professional and collaborative practice, that's where the great work comes from, and that's what we spend our year trying to provide you.
Steve, can you kind of continue that thought a little bit? Somebody asked a really important question, which is, how do we prepare our students to learn to deal with misinformation?
Well, it's first of all, it is also a methodology. So we have both courses, credit courses, and continual kind of workshops to engage with advanced techniques for dealing with social media as a journalist. So one part of it is using social media as a means of discovery, as a means of reporting, but to be able to sort truthful material on social media from organized propaganda or from other kinds of misinformation. There are, as some of you who are engineers may well know, there are technical approaches that you can take to metadata and to the history of social media postings that can help you determine whether something is reliable or not. And there are other kinds of techniques that newsrooms employ to avoid being trapped by propaganda that may be deliberately manufactured to look legitimate. And we concentrate on some of those techniques. There's a spring workshop the last couple of years that's been quite successful, and I wish I could take it myself, called, I think it's called Information Warfare Reporting, or something along those lines. And Emily Bell, who leads our extraordinary research center in this area, and some other journalists have been teaching, if you want to go out into the dark web and really inform the public about what's happening there, and to hold companies like Facebook accountable for their own policies and their consequences. This is an entire 15-week workshop devoted to the sophisticated techniques that are required to do that kind of reporting. So yeah, it does lie in the specifics, not in a kind of general intention to fight for truth and watch out for organized lies.
And this one will open up to the panel. We have so many amazing resources at the school, the Brown Center, the DART, TAO. What kind of access and abilities will the students have to work with those centers outside or with classes in their studies?
There's a number of opportunities. They're all available. I would just off the top of my head throw out a couple of examples to give you an idea, not because it's comprehensive, which I can't do, but the Brown Center, for example, runs something that's very popular called Statistic Breakfast. A lot of you, I find journalists sometimes are nervous about numbers and they're not comfortable working with those concepts. So Mark Brown, who runs the Brown Center, he will run these data breakfasts that are intended to bring everybody in and get you comfortable with something that you might not have spent time with. Maybe you didn't do statistics in college or high school, and we'll get you there. And at the other realm of what they do, they also will run some fascinating, even in the time of pandemic, and they were on Zoom because they weren't in person, some fascinating webinars and interactive sessions on sort of where the cutting edge and the frontier, as Steve would put it, of digital journalism is. Some of the most engrossing stuff you've seen these days, whether it's reconstructing, satellite images of Uyghurs being held in China, or of drone attacks, or of reconstructing other kinds of things that are being done with combinations of data and visual journalism and pulling it all together. He'll be running workshops with people who are doing that, and you can participate. The same is true for the TAO Center and many of the other centers here. There are lots of student-facing events in addition to the research they are doing, and you will find them very open to it. They also are all teachers and instructors as well.
All right, and this last question, John, I'm going to direct to you because I think it reflects a little anxiety on the part of potential applicants. So not so much about the specific question, which is a good one, but about the application process. So this question is, and then we will wrap up, guys. But this question is there any specific way that applicants should format their resume when submitting their application?
It'd be interesting. I need to know a little bit more about that, and I encourage the student who asked that to come on later about the application process. One thing that we look for is on our interface is to make sure absolutely everything is done correctly. All the boxes are checked and there are no typos. Other than that, you say format, not in particular. Our application process is pretty explicit on how to download, how to upload and what to upload. So the student who wants to do that should be on our, Ross, is that right? Should be on our subsequent. Christine, you wanted to jump in there?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that we recognize that there are many, that the practice of formatting a resume can be different in different countries. You know, the United States, we don't use photographs. Other countries, there are photographs. The United States, we don't put the birth date in. In other countries, you do, and you put information about marital status, that sort of thing. Use whatever is appropriate in your own country, and it will be absolutely fine. We're not looking for a specific resume format.
Everybody, thank you so much for your time today. Ross in admissions has posted, you might have seen his message, a general email in the chat. So we really encourage you to write to the admissions office with all application questions and any specific questions you might have. We hope you had a great time today and that this was informative. We look forward to hearing from you. Can we do a Zoom clap? I don't know, even if we can't hear you. I want to say thank you to our panelists. And to those of you for logging on for so many different time zones. I recognize, you know, it's 1 o'clock Eastern here in New York, but I know that it's quite different time depending on where you are in the world. Thanks so much again, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
great
Allie.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.